Hello. How do I position this thing? I'm trying to find some kind of thing to stand my my phone on so I can speak to you all. So far I've been using this Periscope stuff as a thing for touring London tours and stuff like that. I haven't been using it for Final Cut Pro 10 stuff, but of course I've got 299 followers or so, and I imagine they're not following me for tours of London. They're following me for maybe Final Cut Pro 10 things, I don't know. Or people just clicking to see what happens if you click this thing. So I'm just trying to choose my background, reposition my phone. This is my Zoom. So yeah, I don't really have much specific thing to say apart from I'm not wearing a red t-shirt. I should look into the camera, and I'm here to answer questions or talk about Final Cut Pro 10. So Final Cut Pro 10 is Apple's editing software, video editing software, and everyone thinks that maybe there's some big news coming up. Yeah, got a bit further away. What's this in the background here? So yeah, oh! Just want to drop my phone. I'm resting it on a candlestick. I'm trying to position this thing so my face looks a bit big in this shot, but then the further away I go, the further down I am in the frame. Maybe if I find a pillow or something, I'll reposition my phone. Anyway, problems. Just so I don't have to hold the phone all the time. What does this button do? So yeah, Final Cut Pro 10. There's going to be people think that maybe Apple are going to have a new announcement on Tuesday of next week, a new version of Final Cut Pro 10. Some people think it's Final Cut Pro 10.2. Just because we haven't got to Final Cut Pro 10.1.9 doesn't mean that we won't go to Final Cut Pro 10.2 next. Final Cut Pro 10.2 just means they've got enough new versions or something's big enough that they should give it a new version number. So yeah, any questions or anything you want to talk about, here it is. This is a different kind of Periscope thing. So the question is Tuesday as in tomorrow. No, I'm talking next Tuesday. It could be maybe a new version tomorrow, who knows? I think tomorrow will be a good day if they're going to do a new version, because then it'll give lots of people a chance to have questions about, a new version. But Apple don't trust me, because I spoiled all the fun on Final Cut Pro 10.1. Because hey, I had a good idea of what was going to happen, and I decided to let the cat out of the bag a month or so early before it came out, so beginning of November. So the question is, am I going to NAB? I wish I could. In September of last year, I got a booking to work in Mexico during NAB week, so that's a bit of a pity. So I'll be working at NAB. I won't be at NAB, but I'll be a couple of time zones closer. So instead of being, so at the moment it's now 20 to 7 in the evening in the UK, I'll be in Mexico in the Cancun type time zone, and maybe that'll make it easier for me to be there virtually at the FCP Works suite. So I suppose if I was NAB, I'll probably be at the FCP Works suite, because Apple are going to be there talking about Final Cut Pro 10, and other people are going to be there. And so I would, if I was going, I would book some places there. I would book a couple of sessions and go and visit people and see what's going on. So question is, do I use libraries? I use Final Cut Pro 10 libraries. Yeah, I have to use libraries. I use one library at a time for one job. I usually use one event. I use the one event model, and then I set up event folders with collections inside. Is my style. So that's what I do. And I set up smart collections for things like edits, so I could just click the smart collection and then all the edits appear and stuff like that. So that's what I do. One could use Final Cut Pro 10 to use the Marvel Comics metaphor. You could say that maybe the next version will be beginning of phase 2 of Final Cut Pro 10. I like to think it is Final Cut Pro, and also probably a big new version of Motion, because it hasn't really had a major update since 2011. That's almost 4 years now. Is there going to be an audio mixer in Final Cut Pro 10? Maybe. It'd have to be by role. It'd have to be, setting up the levels and having things appear in roles. So in other words, all the audio from roles. So it'd be kind of a bus-based mixer, I guess. Which helps for round-tripping to audio software. such as Logic Pro 10 and other things. After archiving a library, can I then delete the library on my main editing drive? Yes, absolutely. Another question, multicam soon. Well, I think the multicam is pretty good in Final Cut Pro 10. I think in the case of multicam, I'd like to be able to view a project as a bin. Well, I shouldn't say bin, should I? I should say smart collection. So I can see all the clips in a project in a smart collection. Would be quite cool. So the question, Knit in Yahoo. Any new plugins on the horizon from you, Alex? Well, I'm always working on new plugins. I used to give them away for free because I like the idea of instantly getting them out there and instantly helping people. But lots of people telling me I should be getting more benefit from these plugins apart from just making them and giving away for free. So I stopped giving them away for free, even though I'd love to, because it's nice to instantly be able to help people. But on the other hand, how come I'm not making out like a bandit like these other plugin makers? Turns out originality is not necessarily the right thing, is the most important thing when doing plugins. Maybe it's having a good website that people come back to and good enough plugins that people don't need to go anywhere else. It's funny there is no product, let's say, there's no product finding Final Cut Pro thing. Thank you very much, Chaz Cow. Love your Grow Shrink plugin. Yes, I've got a plugin, so I might as well do some amazing promotion. Come to Final Cut Pro, come to Alex4D, not Final Cut Pro 10, come to alex4d.com. And there's links to various free plugins, including a couple of the plugins that I made that were used in the post-production of Focus. So Mike Metzdorf got in touch with me halfway through 2013 and said, I was wondering if you could help with some plugins. Therefore, we're working on the first major feature film. And he emailed me, and then about a day or so later, I sent him a plugin, and then a few months later, he asked for another one. So yeah, I do plugins. So alex4d.com is where the plugins. And also there's a link there to my old plugins, which is on my on blog.alex4d.com/afcpx, and Grow Shrink is one of those. Yeah, the plugins I want to do are going to try and make them really everyday type plugins, the kind of plugins that you want to use nearly all the time because you just want to get back to telling your story. You not necessarily want to do huge amounts of Flash. Yep, shouldn't use Flash. Professional, cool-looking things. What you're really talking about is trying to do something that helps you solve a problem and then get back to work. That's my tactic. Let's see if that works. So maybe a more advanced version of Grow Shrink, I don't know, and other plugins to go with it. So yeah, as I said, what kind of official communications have I had with Apple ever? Hardly any. I once did a blog post saying that the update of Final Cut Pro, probably 10.0.6, broke some plugins. Because of the way keyframes changed and the plugins weren't updated to change the way the keyframes worked. So on the blog post, I just said, here's new versions of those plugins that don't have that problem. And then somebody from the team said, oh, could you send us some examples of how this bug works and then we'll be able to fix it? And I said, they're all on the website. So I have ever had any official communication with Apple about Final Cut Pro 10 or anything like that. Once somebody from the team followed one of my Twitter accounts. That's it. I think they are very resistant to communicating in any way with somebody who's got an audience. So I've got a bit of an audience. I have to say 3,000 followers on Twitter and a few hundred visits a day to my blog, downloading things and downloading to my site, I should say. So yeah, I have no privileged information about what's coming out, which is really good, which means I can speculate all I want and I'm not spoiling and not getting anything, somebody says show off. Yes, I'm showing off about how many followers I've got and how many visits I get and stuff like that. But I've been building up my brand instead of getting on and doing my plugins. So it's a kind of procrastination instead of actually getting on with what I should be doing. I'm doing procrastination. It's a dangerous sort of procrastination because it's the procrastination where I don't get on with things, but I'm not completely wasting my time. I'm doing a bit of tweeting, which people find useful, and maybe a bit of blogging or something like that. So I'm the Final Cut Pro 10 guesser, I would say. So, aren't they changing their approach to internet? Whoa! Hey! Oh, it's lovely. What's happened here? That's really weird. I seem to zoom in there. It was really strange. Yes, so it turns out that obviously there is really big news that Apple are inviting people to their home. It's a bit like Steve Jobs is like Willy Wonka, and Tim what's his name? Tim Curry. He's a skater. Tim Cook is like Charlie Bucket. Charlie Bucket says, "Okay, instead of nobody coming in and going out of the mystical Apple chocolate factory, now people can come and check things out." So it is very interesting that people are going to be allowed in, which I find amazing. So I don't know if I'm going to go along to that event. I don't plan to, because obviously the flights over to the States are pretty expensive. It's probably $1,500, $1,600 or something like that to use American money, or about £1,100, and also the cost of actually attending. So I'm big-headed enough to think that maybe I might not be able to learn that much at such a sort of event. That's terribly big-headed of me. But hey, you never know. If they desperately come on their hands and knees and say, "Please come along," and that'd be really good. So yes, I hope to be connected virtually like you all to all these things. You only need one good person who is going to be periscoping or connecting live and all the news and all the stories, stuff like that. So the question, am I planning to get an Apple Watch? Well, here's a watch that I have. It is not an Apple Watch. It cost me £9 or $15. So I do wear a watch, and what I try to do when wearing a watch is only look at it if it actually supports making a decision, which is quite hard, because sometimes when you're late, you really just want to keep on looking at your watch, but what's the point of that? So I would say my watch would be supporting making a decision, and of course the idea of making a decision with a watch would be, shall I get my phone out? That would be the Apple Watch. So I very rarely buy version 1 of Apple products. I bought a version 1 Macintosh, which in May 1984, so it's the first batch that came to the UK. And I got the first iPod in November 2001. And what else? There's another first thing that I got. I think that was it. Yeah, I wait till other people test it. It's best to other people test it. So I'm not gonna test the Apple Watch and be into all that, and I'll wait till future versions come out. Certainly waited for 4 years before I got an iPhone, and the phone I got before this is an iPhone 6 Plus that I'm using now. Before this, it was an iPhone 4, so I waited quite a long time for that. So I'm not necessarily one who gets the first thing that comes out. Yeah, so what would I think Adobe and Avid, obviously, it seems to me that they think that Apple are going to be doing some kind of shared editing thing. It's my guess that they are guessing that, because the announcement of Adobe CC being able to be used on Avid hardware for being qualified better and stuff like that. So obviously Avid and Adobe have to make some guesses about what Apple are going to do. So on the high end, Final Cut Pro 10 could have some sort of shared editing. And on the low end, I don't know, maybe stuff to do with iMovie and Final Cut Pro having better links, or iMovie being used, it's like the producer's tool, or keep doing kind of stuff, I don't know. I have no idea what's going to happen next. Another way to look at it is, even if there's no new version of Final Cut Pro 10 for another year, it actually doesn't really matter. It's really good software. So if the software is really good and people are producing great stuff with it, let's not be greedy. I don't every single day when I'm editing, I don't think I wish I had an audio mixer. What I'd like for me, for making plugins, is metadata access, so plugins have access to the metadata of clips. So I can do plugins that know what kind of clip they are and know what time of day they were shot, or I can do lots of graphics and overlays based on lots of metadata stuff. But I know most people don't really particularly care about that, or even know that they need it. But when they see the plugin doing that, then they'll think it's really cool. But yeah. So I don't know. I like the idea of sound conform changes. I like the idea of doing stuff to. And the interesting thing about what we do, or people who are really into Final Cut Pro 10, is that we want it to have various pro features and pro cool things that will be really good for pro stuff. But in practice, should Apple really spend too much of their resources on stuff like that? Given the fact, should the 5,000 or 6,000 people or the 25,000 people who use Final Cut Pro for professional stuff be really controlling what the product does for the other 950,000, 1.2 million people use Final Cut Pro 10? It's a bit like when people talk about Thunderbolt 2. I want Thunderbolt 3. I want Thunderbolt 4. So wanting those things, but we all know that most people don't need Thunderbolt. Just a very few people, just people like us. So can I make a high frame rate converter? Well, what would you want a high frame rate plugin to do in Final Cut Pro 10? Just trying to work out what it is that you'd want. So unfortunately, I'm kind of trying to look at the camera, so this looks better than looking down what people are saying. Maybe get the outline a bit better, a bit further back. So yeah, I don't know. Final Cut Pro 10. What kind of plugin to do with high frame rate stuff would you like? Right, so making 25 frames a second seem to be 50 frames a second virtually. Well, the plugin system doesn't allow to do that, at least with Motion, which is the kind of plugins that I do, which is essentially just using Motion, which is the easy type. I'm not doing interframe interpolation kind of stuff that you can do using actual proper programming. So, and thanks for the thank you for the free plugins. I'm trying to resist doing more. And I know you don't want me to resist, you just want me to do free stuff. But anyway, it's my problem. So yeah, as regards high frame rate stuff, well, yeah, Motion is, as I said, the version 5 of Motion came out in June 2011, and only hasn't really been updated much in the intervening years. Say, for example, you don't have control over shutter speed or frame angle, all that kind of stuff, or motion blur. I mean, there is a blog post on my site, Alex4D.com/notes, where I list something like 60 new features I'd like to see in Motion. And somebody told me that there's a new product manager for Motion that started last summer, so hopefully she and other people will be able to get access to, even though I have no communication with Apple and they don't communicate with me, I'm told that what they do is they get certain web pages, and if anything changes on them, they're printed out and then they're brought to the team. Obviously, Richard Taylor's Final Cut Pro 10 list. So the question is, do I have any recommendations on how to use Motion to make plugins? The funny thing is, actually making plugins is a good way of learning Motion, because learning Motion in itself as a motion graphics thing is quite complicated. But if you've got a specific task to do, a specific thing in Motion, and you want to just make it available in Final Cut Pro 10, and knowing how to do that is actually a good way of understanding that thing in Motion really well. So, say for example, in Motion, instead of using keyframes, you've got behaviors that do various things, like make things react to gravity. Imagine getting a behavior in Motion and trying to make it so that you applied that to a title in Final Cut Pro 10, turning the gravity on and off or reversing it. That will help you understand what behaviors are in Motion a little bit, and also be able to make a plugin that does that to titles or any stuff that's in Final Cut Pro 10. So I would suggest you do the Ripple course on rigging and publishing in Motion. You could do that Ripple training thing. It'll tell you a lot about making plugins, and then that'll be a kind of sneaky way in through the back door of learning how to use Motion and why behaviors are really useful. Because behaviors work really well when you don't know the length or what kind of clip you're applying something to, or you change your mind about what you're applying what you're applying it to. Whereas keyframes, you get into trouble that way. And there is a Facebook group of Motion users that you can do a search on Facebook for Motion, and you'll find people submit things to Motion Facebook and say, look, I did all this with no keyframes. So even though there are keyframes for doing animation in Motion, try not to use them and see if you can really work out how to do stuff without using keyframes and using using behaviors. Because the advantage of using behaviors is, instead of using stored values for things, you can use the GPU and the CPU to do calculations, which means everything's a lot faster. So yeah, I would suggest do plugins with Final Cut Pro with Motion in order to learn how to use Motion. It's an idea I came up with while talking to Chris Fenwick on an episode of the Final Cut Grill, where he called me up and I couldn't tell if he was actually going to broadcast it or he just only wanted to chat. So I was kind of hedging my bets a little bit. So yeah, as regards an audio adjustment layer, I mean, I don't know to what extent Final Cut Pro 10 inside of it has got bundles of audio effects, and they combine together to produce the audio effects that you see. Say, for example, alien voice is some plugins combined together using a bit of XML, and then that's called an effect bundle. It's inside Final Cut Pro 10, but there's no authoring tool for creating audio effect bundles. Maybe there'll be an authoring tool that does that. Maybe that'll be in Motion, or maybe that'll be in something else, because it's just XML that combines various audio units together with various parameters and then publishes them and makes them available to a UI that's in Final Cut Pro 10 as an audio plugin, but nobody's investigated that. So is there a plugin to create auto-tune? Well, no, not yet. I mean, the thing is that obviously I don't really know Logic that well, although I bought it just to check it out. It'll be interesting to work out how to publish various plugins in their UI and combine them together with some sort of authoring tool and connect them together. But there doesn't seem to be much of a nodal-based editor, at least in Logic, that I've seen. So maybe Motion 5.2 might be the one, or Motion 6, or whatever is coming out next week, or if it does come out. Although if you add a new product manager to an app in the summer of 2014, there's a really good chance there'll be a bit more of an update than just bug fixes in 2015 for Motion. And that means better plugins and stuff like that. For best practice in a shared environment for Final Cut Pro 10. I don't know. I don't really use Final Cut Pro 10 very much in a shared environment. When I go on site and do same-day edits and stuff like that, I pass transfer libraries backwards and forwards following the Alex Snelling rules. So if you go 10.1.co.uk. Anyway, go to the Apple website, and under documentation or whatever it is Apple supports, there's a link to using a Final Cut Pro 10 in a shared environment. That document that came out when Final Cut Pro 10.1 came out is still the document to use, and using shared libraries. That works pretty well for me, but essentially I'm only dealing with 2 or 3 cameras at a time and between 2 other editors, so it's pretty straightforward for what I'm doing. And quite a lot of their edits, I'm not passing edit back to them, they're just doing different edits and I'm doing edits, and we're just passing stuff back between us. So I can't point to any particular real examples of Final Cut Pro 10 in a shared environment, but I can make stuff up that sounds plausible, like most people. So yeah, metadata plugins, that would be really good. Somehow making, well, what I'd like for Motion 5.2, I mean, I know you Final Cut Pro 10 fans don't care about Motion, but what I like the idea for Motion to do is to make Motion plugins or plugins created in Motion work in Final Cut Pro 10, but also work in any app that wants to on the Mac. So you have the plugin working in iMovie, which would be quite cool, but also work in Avid and Premiere and Resolve. So that means you can do an edit imagine doing an edit in iMovie and using some plugins, and then make it better in Final Cut Pro 10. And then if you want to do a grade or do something in Resolve, then all the same plugins you've used also work in Resolve, because it's the same, essentially the playback engine that is Motion, if that was available as generally in the operating system. That means those same plugins you created in one place will be able to work everywhere, and you wouldn't have to worry about plugins working in one place, working in the other. And maybe Apple should do that, because there's a plugin system called OpenFX available in Blackmagic DaVinci Resolve. So it's a kind of open system for creating plugins that work in different post-production tools, and that works cross-platform. And one thing Apple don't want, I don't particularly care if pros go from Final Cut Pro 10 to Avid or to After Effects or Adobe Premiere. Who cares as long as they stay on the Mac? It's more, as long as they don't go over to Windows or PCs. That's the really bad news. And I think if there's cross-platform plugins, it makes it that much easier for people to, I think I'll start on Resolve on the Mac, or I can just move it to the Resolve on the PC and I can still use those same plugins. So hopefully, exactly, Red Giant Universe. Any thoughts on Red Giant Universe? That's exactly my point. Red Giant Universe is a cross-platform thing, so I think a good defense against that for Apple, in order to make sure the Macs keep on selling, is to make the plugin environment on the Mac that much better than it could ever be on the PC or on Linux or something like that. So that means creating better authoring tools and better stuff and better plugins and Final Cut Pro 10 and other apps, including Avid and Premiere on the Mac. So that's what I would do. And FX Factory as well. Yeah, so the question, FX Factory is obviously a good system for doing that sort of thing. So anyway, we'll see what they do when they make their announcements about Motion soon. Probably at least by June. because why have a big event if there's stuff to talk about? So Final Cut Pro 10.2 or Motion 5.2, Motion 5.6, who knows? We'll see. So as soon as I stop speculating and as soon as I stop guessing, then you know I've been briefed and I can't talk about it. So that's why I can shoot my mouth off like this. So yeah, that's Final Cut Pro 10 and Motion for all I know about it now. So the question is, working on any film projects? No, I get some questions from people that I sometimes help people who have got questions about film projects, which is some guesses about workflow. And I do have the ear of a few people who are first assistant editors on feature films in the UK, but I'm not using Final Cut Pro 10 on any UK feature film projects yet. But if I'm lucky, maybe they'll turn to me for some advice. So some films you've heard of, at least they're first assistant editors, I'm talking to them. Essentially, I have to learn how to talk to avid first assistant editors in such a way that I don't sound like I'm being totally brainwashed and turned into a Final Cut Pro 10 zombie. I'm trying to kind of reach out to them and say, don't worry, here's why Apple abandoned you all, and here's why maybe you might want to consider Final Cut Pro 10 in the future. So, thank you very much. One of my favorite plugins is Inside Outside. I sometimes use Inside Outside. I invented this plugin called Inside Outside because I was shooting stuff and I wasn't quite getting focus, and I turned out afterwards the person had flown home that I'd shot, and I realized it's not in focus. How do I make it look like something's in focus? If I blur the outside more and sharpen a little bit in the middle, it'll actually look like it's more in focus than it really is, because it's all about relative sharpness that matters. So I created that plugin for myself, and then I made that available at Alex4D.com if you want Inside Outside. So you can brighten or darken the inside of an area or the outside of an area and blur it and do all those kind of things to it if you want. So if you want to check it out. Yes, so I've got a long list of probably 150 plugins that I have not got around to making, but thank you very much. Yes, I need to get on with that. Stop procrastinating. Stop doing other stuff. Stop tweeting. I can't help it. So I had my 10,000th tweet over the weekend. Who cares? But feels like I'm not wasting my time completely and hopefully being quite useful. So, yeah. People want updates to Final Cut Pro 10, but as I said earlier, maybe it's not necessarily, it's actually pretty good as it is at the moment, the Final Cut Pro 10. If you look at what people in the UK are doing, people in London, the interesting thing, as I'd say, is the fact they're doing offline edits. TV commercials and music videos, tens of thousands of dollars or pounds being spent on stuff, and it's the offline's being done Final Cut Pro 10, either on location or nearby or offline, and then it's being done on things like high-end things like Quantels. Maybe in a year or so's time, those people are going to say, "Oh yeah, we know how to use Final Cut Pro 10," just because some cool editors were sending their stuff, their all-winning edits over and from converted from Final Cut Pro 10. The problem with I imagine post-production people have as well with Final Cut Pro 10 is that it's difficult for people who are consultants to make money out of it. How do you make money out of Final Cut Pro 10 if you can't sell it and you can't make any margin on the hardware because people just go to the Apple Store? So it's a very different economic model for the people supporting Final Cut Pro 10 and the consultants, because what feature film studios and TV companies want is they want a company they call 24 hours a day who can answer all the questions necessary on doing Final Cut Pro 10. And Apple don't particularly care about that economic model because they don't think that making things better for people in high-end post-production is going to change the world. There's a good bit of PR in a famous TV program or a feature film being done in Final Cut Pro 10, but it's not changing the world. And I still think that what they're into is saying, okay, you got a cause that you need to make a film out of, or you got a TV program or a thing that's going to change your world, then iMovie and Final Cut Pro 10 are the right solution for you. And, the pro in Final Cut Pro 10 is not professional editor, it's Final Cut Pro because you're professional something else. Professional doctor, lawyer, teacher, and you need to do an edit. Just like Photoshop is not for photographers necessarily. It's for people who've got other jobs, so you need to do the jobs, Yeah. Anyway, that's a kind of problem is that Apple don't really have a myth-making story about Final Cut Pro 10. They didn't explain the why of it. They wouldn't explain the what of it, which is pretty bad, so they got a bit of a problem there. But anyway, I'm rabbiting on now. Not quite sure what this thing is, but I'm just having a go at talking on Periscope about the things that maybe some of my followers might be interested in. Because before, when I was trying it out, I was just walking around London because I was just trying this thing out. But now, of course, all these people who, well, if you downloaded Periscope recently, you're automatically following me. You're not following me because I'm in London and I can walk around London. You're following me maybe because I've got some useful guesses about Final Cut Pro 10. Anyway, that's enough for now. Maybe I'll try to do this again in the future. And thanks for joining me. Yeah, it looks like at least I've got my phone stand working properly, which is a candlestick. I'll show you the other candlestick. So it's just resting on the table. And yeah, I don't know when I'll do this again. Probably at the same time of the day. It's quite convenient for me and maybe convenient for some of my other people. Before I do my evening things. So thanks for joining me. It's 7:05 in London. That could be the future for you or the past, depending where you are in the world. So thanks for joining me. What does this button do?